Right, so Sam, welcome to Brick by Brick.
Thank you
This is
very
actually
much.
going to be
Great to be here.
it's going to be the third episode, so you're now coming in with a bronze medal. So yeah, that's good.
Bronze isn't bad. I'll take bronze. Yeah.
I know you're not used to that, but yeah. So for those that don't know you, Sam has organised races, and fill me in if I'm not getting them all right here. Ultramarathon races in England, Scotland, Wales, which are the easy ones. Madeira is a new one. Jordan, Tanzania, Morocco, the Azores. Am
You're
I getting
doing
them right?
well. Um,
But
we've got Slovenia, Sri Lanka,
oh,
Mexico, um, and I think that's it.
okay, I forgot loads.
Three.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think I want to start there. So you're the co-founder of Ultra X, who does these ultramarathon races, which can be anywhere from 50K a day for 5 days to like a 70K 1 day race.
Yeah, we actually have everything now from single stage 25K. So, it's funny. We started out, and we'll probably kind of come on to this, but we started out basically looking to put on adventures and just focusing on like 5 day, 220 kilometers. But what hit us for six for a couple of years, and we kind of diversified a bit, and now we have everything from 25K single stage to 5 day, 220K. In the middle of the Jordanian desert. So a real mix, bit of a range.
We met in Jordan in the desert because I was with my other friend Sam, who was filming for you guys, and I was like his essentially glorified personal assistant, which, yeah, which was an amazing experience. Why don't you talk about Ultra X a bit, like explain the origin story and how it got to the point where you're marshalling 100 people in 35-degree heat in the scorpion-ridden desert in the middle of Jordan.
I think we've I wouldn't say scorpion ridden. I think we've seen probably about five scorpions in the five
Wow.
years I've been there, and they are pretty small. But yeah, it's kind of a long story, but also there's like a simple short version. Essentially, I stumbled into trail running and ultra running when I was pretty young, when I was 22. Had never really done any running before, but quite liked the idea of the challenge. Had an amazing time at an event, and found it incredibly frustrating every time I said to someone I was doing this, and they were like, "Oh, this isn't for me," or "I couldn't do that," or as if it was like this kind of quite elitist, like impossible thing. And I was also quite passionate. I kind of wanted to do my own thing of sorts, set up my own business or something like that. And essentially, over the couple of years, I realized there was an opportunity in the kind of trail and ultra space to try and create a brand that made ultra running and made the experience that I had a bit more accessible. And that was kind of where it started. So Jordan, the place you kind of alluded to a moment ago, was our kind of original race, our baby, which was originally actually 300 kilometers in 6 days. And it quickly got brought down, I think, because a few people ended up in hospital, to 250 kilometers in 5 days. And that was kind of our format for a few years. And that was kind of a bit of a passion project, a bit of a side hustle. And in 2018, I say we, so that's Jamie and me. Jamie's the other co-founder. Essentially decided to go all in and rebrand what this original event was called, the Wadi Rum Ultra, into Ultra X Jordan, and basically launch a series of events called Ultra X, with 5 day events in Sri Lanka and Mexico. And yeah, we've been kind of doing it ever since, and the aims have always remained the same. It's really growing the number of events that we've got across the world, trying to get more people doing those events, and by that I mean not just numbers, like different types of people that may not have done these kind of events before, and creating a brand which which kind of can be related to that space and that sector. And it's been a pretty crazy 4 years for many reasons, not just the kind of industry we're in, but everything that's kind of gone on for the last particularly 20 and 21. But yeah, we're still going, still very much following the kind of same vision. And yeah, it's looking like the next couple of years are going to be incredibly exciting, just because we're now getting to a point where this space is blowing up. That I think, marathon's not long enough anymore. People are looking for more and more extreme and different things and experiences, rather than just races. And a lot more people are into kind of the trail space. So yeah, it's kind of, it feels like we've been doing it for a long time, but it also feels like we're literally just starting out, because actually, whilst it's been 4 years, it's been 2 years of actually properly being able to do what we kind of set out to do.
Yeah, exciting. I'm sure there's big things coming up. Although you guys started on a very strong point. I actually forgot that was your starting point. And can you talk a bit more about like how that worked? Typical startup founder, like software or something like that, in this day and age, you make the products, do classic marketing. It could all be on a laptop. Organizing a race in the Wadi Rum Desert is certainly not on a laptop. And from being there's a lot of things you have to organize to make it happen. So how do you, I really just don't understand how you go from nothing to a race in Jordan.
Well, yeah, it was a series of mistakes and coincidences mainly, I think. So it all started, this race in Jordan started back in, I think, 2010 or 2011, where a guy called Jamie, who's not the Jamie that is now a co-founder, ran across the Wadi Rum Desert by himself, raising money for charity. And in doing so, he took on board like some local Bedouins who you actually met when you were out there, same kind of operators. Okay. And they basically supported him on this challenge. He raised a load of money for charity, and he had this amazing experience. Fast forward a couple of years, and Jamie 1 meets Jamie 2. Jamie 2 is my Jamie Sparks, who you've met in a pub, I think. And Jamie 1 is talking about this experience and this event, and Jamie 2 is saying it would be amazing. Who's kind of a bit more kind of business minded, or what was really into kind of his adventure, was like, we should do this as an event. We should do this as a race. I was not in the picture at this time at all. So essentially, these two between them do create an event, which happens in 2015. And that was the 300-kilometer one I mentioned, which I think had 5 or 6 people do it. Pretty much all of them were Jamie's mates, and a few people ended up in hospital because it was pretty savage. And Jamie essentially did all kind of the logistics, operations, etc. My Jamie and Jamie
Hence
1.
Hence why they ended up in hospital.
No, I think it's just I don't know. I actually think there was a lot of factors out of their control. That it was a bit of a freak year. There was a couple of people that weren't prepared at all, competitors, and it was an incredibly hot year. And actually, I say that, I'm exaggerating. Of course, it was 2 people ended up in basically, and that was only because, in our events, we have hospitals like basically on site. Everyone kind of ends up in hospital for a little bit. There we had one local medic. So when you went to the local medic, you got taken straight to hospital. So I'm making it sound more extreme than it was. But anyway, it's a better story. It's a better story that way. And anyway, so my Jamie was kind of managing this event. The other Jamie was not really doing anything, but he had the connections. On the same year was the year I did this event, the Marathon des Arbres, which was my kind of first experience in ultra running.
Oh, you did that?
Exactly. Yeah. So
I had no idea you'd done that.
Yeah. So that was kind of my first adventure, where I kind of got into it, having never really done anything before. And
can you explain what it is for people who might not know?
Yeah, of course. So it's Marathon des Arbres is probably the most well-known multi-stage ultra. It's 260K over 6 days in the Sahara Desert, carrying everything that you need for the week. So carrying all your food, sleeping bag, roll mat, everything basically. And it's about 800 to 1,000 people, 35-degree heat, heavy sand. It's pretty hardcore, and it's also, it's not just a running event. It's very much, body maintenance, like trying to manage your calorie intake. There's a lot which goes into it outside of the physical preparation. But anyway, I'd kind of done that, and it was literally because I wanted to have a challenge, and I thought it was going to be do it, scratch that itch, and move on, and then do something else. But I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I had an amazing time, and one of my buddies who I did that event with was a friend of Jamie's, a guy called Ollie Walker, and about 8 months after the Marathon des Sables, Ollie came up to me and he was like, I've got this mate, Jamie, who's got this event in Jordan and it's super cheap. And there'll be like 20 people doing it. And I'm going to go. Do you want to come? And it was genuinely too good to be true. Like, I knew a few people going, great friends. Like, it was exactly what I wanted to do. It was great value compared to the Marathon des Sables, which is incredibly expensive. So I basically jumped in, did that event, and that was where I met Jamie for the first time. I'd kind of had interactions. We had a lot of mutual friends and stuff before then, but that was the first time we actually met. And that was 2017. After that event, as you do when you're like 20 odd people in a small environment, you spend quite a lot of time together. You had a couple of we were all based at, like, quite a lot of us were based in London. So actually we finished the event and you had a couple of like drinks and reunions and stuff. But anyway, Jamie and I got on well. It was clear we had like similar ideas about the space. And also at the time I was looking to do another like business venture. I was looking to quit my job and do this other thing. And it became quite clear that he was like, oh, I'm thinking about starting a business. You're thinking about starting a business. We've got quite potentially like complementary skill sets. What can we do here? And that was literally how it began. And then, so that was 2017. And then we spent a whole year basically mapping out the future, mapping out UltraX. 2018, we ran the event together. So we like co-directed it. That was about 50 people. So it'd grown like, 100, just over, basically doubled a bit that year. And then just after that event was when we both quit our jobs and went full time and rebranded it as UltraX and launched Sri Lanka and Mexico. And then we kind of did that literally just us for a whole year. And since then we kind of been building up, but it was so frustrating actually, because we had 2018 was the rebrand. 2019 was a great year. We kind of did everything we wanted to do in a year one as two. We just built out the team a little bit at the beginning of 2020, ready to go. And then obviously, what comes around the corner and everything kind of shuts down.
So what happened at that point? Did you have enough money to, obviously still here. I can't actually remember. Did you have any other ways of making money? Were you able to put events on in other countries or?
No, we couldn't put events on. I think we kind of hit with a double whammy because it was like events, but also, it was international travel, but also events. So like, at that point, everything we did was abroad. So even if we felt comfortable enough to, put an event on, and it was really complicated because obviously everyone had different like policies. And actually it was really interesting at the time because I remember having like, every week I'd have like different calls with different people in locations and they'd be doing completely different things. And it was like that moment, you're like, oh God, this is just crazy, isn't it? We survived. And that was mainly because our team was so small. And actually, I kind of feel like if you're a big business, when something like that happens, you're probably okay because you've got reserves. If you're a small business like us, you're probably okay because actually you're pretty lean and you can cut stuff. I think the people in the middle were the ones that really struggled. Like for us, everything, basically all of our costs were putting on events. So when we go out to Jordan or whatever, that's a big outlay, of course. But actually, if we didn't put on events, we didn't do anything. It was basically our salaries, which at that point we took nothing out. We both went home and just lived at home, and then it was just marketing, so like advertising, and there was nothing to advertise. So we didn't really do much. We looking back, I actually think we kind of did some good stuff. We essentially very quickly said, okay, this year is not about selling race places. It's not about doing any of that. It's literally our only metric is growing the brand. How can we get more people without spending any money in touch with our events and what we do and our and our kind of, proposition. And actually, it was quite fun in a funny way once you got over the constant stress, because you kind of had this free reign to actually do whatever you wanted, because everyone was like, oh, it's fine, it's COVID. And as long as you kind of communicate why you were doing it pretty clearly, people were pretty receptive. So we did quite a lot of fun, like virtual events. And, we did like the Ultra X World Series, where we picked like random distances somewhere between like 5 and 35K, but they were never like round numbers. They were like 8.1K or 13.2K or stuff like that, just to get people outside their front doors. And did a lot of like online stuff, did a few like film screenings and like, Q&A things, and basically just focused on like building our audience as much as we could. And it was good because everyone was online. And actually, virtual races were incredibly popular. It was kind of one of those weird things where, like, if you'd asked me 2 months before, I would have said, like, I would have been like, no way, like, why would you pay, a $5 to run from your front door and then get sent a medal? Like, I don't get it. But actually, they were amazing because they gave people like things to be motivated about. As soon as you have a leaderboard in the time, you get excited, and you actually, if you've got a virtual race on a Saturday, you will rest on the Friday or whatever, because you want to run well and you want to get your medal. But also at that like weird time, and I'm sure you had like similar, I don't know how you like interacted with your friends during that time, but it was just a sense of community, and like everyone went for a run and took a picture of them on their run and shared it, and there was like this kind of shared experience without actually together. And also, like, a massive thing about our brand has always been accessibility. Like that's literally the reason we set it up at the end of the day. And there's nothing more accessible than a virtual event, because you don't need to travel anywhere, you don't need to pay airfares, you don't need to, you can literally do it from your front door, and it might cost a couple of quid or it might be free, as quite a lot of ours were. So yeah, we did like virtual events, and actually we spent a lot of time in a funny way. I look back and I'm like, actually, we benefited a lot from it, because year one was so mental in that it was just about getting an event ready to go, filling up an event, traveling to that place, doing it, and then moving on to the next one, and just kind of delivering and getting this cycle. Whereas actually not being able to do anything, but being pretty damn committed to this, like, we'd quit our jobs. This was 100% of our time. So every day you'd wake up and be like, okay, what can we do that'll benefit the company in a year's time? So like we created like a sustainability policy, which we still basically kind of adhere to, about how we kind of want to operate and how we want to be responsible in that way. We've created a diversity inclusion policy, and like all these little things which, actually are really important to our brand now, but did take a lot of time. And probably if we hadn't had this pandemic, we wouldn't have done.
Yeah, that's really cool. As it goes to show, like, if you have a positive mindset, most things that are bad can actually be an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of that brand value you're now like capturing now. Capture's quite an aggressive word, but you're reaping the benefits of that now. How did you measure it at the time? Like, you say our main metric was to increase the brand, but like, what is that? Followers or?
It's really difficult. I mean, probably like email addresses at the end of the day. Like that's how we kind of measure our audience mainly, like followers or reach is, these are all like those things. But essentially, yeah, we do a lot of email marketing, and that's how we communicate with a lot of our community now. So like, I guess like two things are the key metrics there, which is like database size, and then like actually open rate on like a weekly basis. So like, it's great having 50,000 email addresses, but actually if only 10,000 are opening them every week, they probably don't even care about us, and that's not important. So it's kind of the percentage, the number of people that are basically reading and enjoying and interacting with our content. And I'd say probably email for us is the most important measure of that. And we do, yeah, a bit on social as well.
Okay, cool. And who does the email stuff? Like, do you all sit down together and plan what you're going to write, or is it an agency, or?
Yeah, it's pretty much, well, yeah, it's a team effort. I've kind of managed most of the emails, we don't have an agency. We've used an agency a little bit in the past before for kind of the digital marketing side, but they've never got involved in the email stuff. Like I don't know. It's one of those things, like, you know, potentially if you get someone who's an expert in, they're going to save you time and do things more effectively and more efficiently. But from our experience, it's been better when we've been taught how to do things and then implemented them ourselves, just because our brand and our tone of voice are super important. And actually, whilst you might have someone who might get a higher conversion rate or click-through rate or whatever open rate sending our emails, if it's not the way I want to say it, it's not right. And like, I remember when at the very beginning, when we started out, we, for like a short period of time, we had someone external doing our social media, and like just responding to queries and like doing posts and stuff. And we just send them images, and yeah, we just, you know, got to the point you look at it and you'd be like, that's not who we want to be. So we manage pretty much all of it. We get a bit of advice from an agency from time to time, but yeah, it's pretty internal.
That's cool, and it actually makes a lot of sense because the brand you have and the company you have, it's not like a scented candle company. It's not a numbers game. It's very personal. Like, from being at one of the races, the amount of emotion that people have when they leave, all their family are watching the updates back at home. It's no like,
oh, 100%.
Small thing.
It's all the people, and it's I think it's almost like a bit of a like misunderstanding sometimes when people kind of think of the sport and they just assume it's like another race, like a London Marathon or a park run or whatever. But you know, it is incredibly personal, and your entire experience really at the end of the day is down to the like the connections you make over that week, and those are all, you know, face to face, human to human. So that's, yeah, it's always been something we've really focused on, and you know, actually, and as you say, it's not really a numbers game. Like, at the end of the day, we could be an incredibly successful company with 2,000 or 3,000 people doing our events a year, and it's just about, you know, giving them a good time.
Actually, I think that might be quite useful to help visualize what UltraX is. Can you explain the journey of a runner in like 2 minutes, from leaving London, arriving in Jordan, camping the first night, setting off at 4 a.m. the next day, and then the whole race?
Yeah. So we'll take Jordan. Jordan's, as I say, we've got a mixture of races now, everything from 25k for 220k. But really, what UltraX is about is 5-day events, because that's the experience we want people to do, and that's what we're all about, and that's what we think the best thing is. And really, everything else is kind of just providing stepping stones for people to get there, because, you know, we understand that it's a big leap. But for something like Jordan, which is basically the same for all of our 5-day events, you would travel out as a competitor to the host location, always on the Saturday. Really, you might travel out before, but essentially the Saturday, you would then arrive in the race hotel. You don't have to stay in the race hotel, but there's a race hotel which we all stay in on Saturday night. There's then a race briefing first thing Sunday morning, where we welcome you, and also do things like kit checks. So every single competitor has to have a list of mandatory items for their safety to take part in the race. So we will literally check that every single person has every single thing on that list. So that entails going around bedrooms, and like they lay them out on beds, or they come down and they put them in the box, and we kind of inspect them and do that, which is always fun. There's always a few dramas, and it's amazing how much people can get worried about kit checks when, you know, it is just a list of things that, you know, it have always been on our website. But yeah, it's I think it's always a bit of relief when you get that done and moved on. Then we get onto coaches, where we travel to basically out in the wild. So wherever the event takes place. In Jordan, this is the Wadi Rum Desert, so it's like a 4-hour coach journey. We arrive at the edge of the desert, which is essentially the furthest point the coaches can go. And this is always, it's like a pretty special moment, because usually the times you're kind of getting down around sundown, kind of like 4 or 5 p.m. On Sunday. And we literally have 40 pickup trucks with with different Yeah, slightly different kind of setups, and all usually at least 20 to 25 years old, maybe even older. They're real like bangers, driven by locals, and essentially we cart all the competitors onto the back of them with all their kit, and they drive into the desert, which is just such an amazing experience because yeah, you're just coming into this like insane setting, you know, open top vehicles out the back for 10 minutes where you're riding to your first camp. So it's always a real highlight of the week. Then they arrive on campsite, which is, you know, the first time they'll have seen what they're going to be basically living in for the week, and they're literally open plan kind of canvas tents or coverings, very like traditional in Jordan, kind of Berber style tents, overlooking the kind of valley. They will be, from that point on, they're basically self-sufficient. We, unlike some other...
Yeah, wait, can I just stop you for a second? Like, you say valley, but it's like, if anyone's seen like Star Wars, it's like the desert floor and then just massive outcrops of these huge mountains. It looks like it could be a different planet, like completely.
Yeah,
especially when the sun's setting. It used to be a riverbed, right? That's what Wadi Rum means. It's like dried up riverbed. Sorry, carry
on. So yeah, we arrive in the camp, and that's kind of first introduction to home. And at that point on, they're we call it self-sufficient. So some events make competitors, like the Marathon des Sables I mentioned earlier, make competitors like basically you start with X amount of stuff, and every day you have to carry all of that for the next day. So that's your food, your water, your you know, sleeping bag, etc. We don't do that quite as extreme. So you get a bag which is transported between campsites every day, but you have to provide all your own food. So we provide hot water. So when you arrive on this into camp on the first evening at like 5:30 p.m. or whatever, there will be hot water ready for you, and then you basically make yourself food. Most people do kind of like astronaut stuff, like you know, freeze-dried, dehydrated meals where you just put a bit of boiling water in a bag and it rehydrates, and actually is actually pretty good. Like I think 5 or 6 years ago, there was very, very few options, and it was all pretty just like high calorie crap. Now, genuinely, like some brands, I mean, they are expensive, but some brands are, you know, really good. So yeah, they do that, and then they basically settle in for the night. Sunday night's usually a fairly quiet one, and then every day, Monday to Friday, follows a very similar formula. There are varying distances, basically anything between 35k to 70k, checkpoints every 10 kilometers, slightly different start times each day because we get people up super early to get them out there, to get them running in the cool, to get as much distance done before the sun gets up, where it gets pretty savage. So like, for example, the 70k day, which is always on Wednesday in Jordan, we start them at 4 a.m. and for each day we provide like hot water 2 hours before. So, you know, runners are getting up at 2 a.m. to make their breakfast and then do their day. And yeah, so each day kind of follows a similar formula. When you get in at the end of the stage, you kind of, you know, chill out, spend time with the other competitors. We have like therapists, so you can get a massage, you can get your food in to get ready to go again the next day. And yeah, it's kind of rinse and repeat. And actually, I think that, you know, what's amazing is that, you know, quite a few of the days, most people are done by 1 p.m. and you've got 5 or 6 hours hanging around in this camp with nothing, very basic, no phone signal. But I think that's actually probably the most important part of the event, because it's where everyone kind of shares their war stories from the day, connects with these other, you know, like-minded people who are genuinely all amazing. Like all of them have, you know, incredible stories, and there's no distraction, because unlike in, you know, London or right now, you know, my phone's there and it's flashing at me, and, you know, and it's just distracting. So you can kind of focus on the moment, which just means you just get much better connections. So yeah, it's amazing how like the bonds that people create over these weeks. And then, yeah, as I say, similar kind of thing every day until Friday. Friday, finish line, people cross, finish the event, and then we have a kind of big barbecue and meal in the desert, and usually a bit of local entertainment. And then stay there first thing Saturday morning, usually fairly early, because we want to make the best use of the day. We go up to Petra, which is one of the most amazing sites, one of the lost wonders of the world, and we go. Competitors have a chance to look around that, and then they go back to Oman, and that's kind of the week done. They can travel home, and most of them spend a night in Oman on Saturday night. And yeah, the format's almost identical in all our 5-day events. The kind of things like Petra are slightly different in each place, and there's a few different offerings. But yeah, that's kind of the format, and we try and keep it consistent. I think it's one of the things we're always very conscious of when building Ultra X is we wanted to create a brand as opposed to just a number of amazing races. And to create a brand, you've kind of got to have some form of consistency. But also it's very important, and I know that it adds so much to the experience that you get something, you know, authentic and local and distinct at each of those events. So it's kind of constantly balancing those different things.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the phone signal thing especially is so important. Like, and there's no choice. It's not like people put their phone in their bag and it's airplane mode. Like, there is no phone signal.
Yeah.
Is Jordan the only one with no phone signal, or do some of the others have that as well? So I feel like that's almost a feature.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. It's pretty much all of ours have times of no phone signal, and quite significant times, because, you know, even our events in the Peak District, well, actually all of our events in the UK, there are times where we don't have signal, which is actually a bit of a nightmare for us. Makes life a lot more complicated. But yeah, Jordan's the only one which has 100%. Actually, that's not true. There's about 2K on the long day where you can get phone signal if you're switched on and you have the phone on. But yeah, pretty much nothing. Definitely not at any of the campsites. Mexico, which was an event which took place in 2019, I don't think will ever happen again. That was even more remote. That was also nothing. And Sri Lanka and Tanzania both kind of have on and off, but vast majority is no phone signal. But like most of the places which are, you know, international, at the very least, like, and it changes a bit now, but like at the very least, a lot of people just, you know, don't have foreign SIM, or, you know, just don't bother with it because they're like, I'm on holiday, I'm switched off. And but yeah, it's a really interesting one, and it's funny speaking to like people who, you know, do lots of these events, and whilst in some way, and it's one of the most like physically challenging, like arduous weeks or few days of your year/life. A lot of people do it for like a refresh, because it is just a switch off, and it's like, and in a funny way, it is really therapeutic. And I like my experience is exactly this, because over the course of a week, you know, you can't think about emails, you can't think about WhatsApp, you can't think about, you know, your to-do list, because you're not going to be able to respond to them. But, you know, all you have to think about is to focus on the moment, and to, you know, basically try and get yourself in a position where you can get through that day, get some food down you, and then go again the next day, like literally down to like primal basics, and then connect with your competitors. And that is so rare in you know, in modern day life, and I think quite important.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, I wasn't running, but I definitely felt therapeutic, like not having. It's just the depth of it. Like, you can say I'm not going to use my phone much today, but nothing is. There's definitely a sense of presence that comes with the knowledge that there's literally no way that you could possibly touch your phone. Like, as soon as you get there, you're like, okay, that's done, and it goes to the bottom of your bag, and it's not even an option. So it really is a great experience for that. It's funny, I was speaking to my grandparents I was with this weekend, and I was talking about COVID and how I actually quite liked the fact that life slowed down a lot, and things like bumping into your neighbors on the streets or going for a run became like a really nice part of my day. And like, I felt very like fulfilled, and I was enjoying it. And I asked them, it came across my mind, I was like, what was it like before you had phones? Is that what this was like? And obviously for them, this was 60 years ago. It's a long time. But they said, yeah, that's what it was like. You would go out and you'd speak to people, and it would be, they had a lot of similarities between COVID and then, and society has just steamrolled on with social media and phones. I do think it's going to be a big problem, actually. Like, how do you find the space to escape from all that and have time to think for yourself?
Yeah, well, I think it's increasingly difficult to be like in the moment and to be like intentional, because there's so much going on and there's always distractions. So like focusing on one specific thing, which at that moment is the most important thing for you, becomes a real challenge, because, you know, you've got this beeping over there, this beeping over there. You could do these 5 other things this very second. In fact, you might as well be like, I might as well have my screen up there, be like responding to my emails on the moment, like even on video calls or whatever. It's so easy to, you know, be secretly like responding over here and doing that. And yeah, I think not having the option is probably the only way that we can kind of solve that problem. And I don't know how that's gonna be solved, because we're you know, in a world where increasingly there's so many more ways to kind of connect, and it's scary.
As like a growing startup founder, I mean, you've got a load of employees now. There's a lot of responsibilities, and I'm sure your time is being pulled left, right, and center. So, do you have any like protocols or systems or habits with your phone? Like, you don't switch on in the morning or anything like that, or do you have a way to try and manage it?
Not specifically. I am quite. I find it really interesting, like, you know, that thing I spoke about earlier, like trying to be intentional at any moment. And like there's a great book by Nir Eyal about I can't remember what it's called, but essentially it's all about basically being intentional. And like, it's fine scrolling on social media, or it's fine spending time on your phone, but like, is that what you want to be doing at that moment? Because so often, you know, we waste, you know, 20-30 minutes scrolling needlessly. If you're doing research, that's cool, that's fine, as long as you kind of got it factored in. So I try and remind myself. I'm pretty anal about, like, first thing every day I will create like a plan for my day, and I will you know, set my tasks and set my priorities. And, you know, even if I'm super busy and like slammed with stuff and I've got 50 things I'll go out that day, I'll always spend, you know, 5 minutes in the morning being like, okay, these are things I want to really focus on this day, and this is the order I'm going to do them. And I think knowing, you know, what the priorities are, and then trying to kind of be intentional during your day with the tasks you do, means that you don't get distracted as much. But I don't have any specific rule. Actually, I turn off all notifications on like emails, because I turn off most notifications on pretty much all apps apart from WhatsApp, because essentially I like that, you know, the philosophy that your phone, if you're responding to every notification, your phone's in control of you. But if you're going into your emails at the time that you want to go into your emails, or your Instagram at the time you want to go into your Instagram, you're winning that battle. So yeah, I kind of try and mute as much as I can, and then I'll have my phone on loud call. So if anyone actually wants me, they can always get a hold of me. But anything else is usually muted, so I can kind of get on with stuff and check in when I need to.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And actually, I've started doing that as well. So no notifications for anything.
Yeah.
Which I might actually have to add WhatsApp back, because I've had a few people now like quite annoyed at me for not being accessible. But it changes what you see your phone as. Like, it becomes, now if it's on my desk, it's not like attracting my attention, because I know it can't buzz, and I'd have to want to go into it. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. So you started running when you were 22.
Properly, yeah. I mean,
trail running, and you're a very good runner.
So I would say, yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like, I did sport, so I always ran. It wasn't like I was never like, you know, couldn't run a 5K or whatever. But I did a lot of like team sport and stuff until I was about 18. Played a little bit at uni throughout for like 3 or 4 years, but then got into like a working like work in London, and signed down for this event. And that was really when I first started like training for running. So, you know, I ran. It would be a lie if I said I didn't run before, but it was always like, because I feel I'm fit and I'm going to go for 5K or 20 minutes. Like, it was when I signed down to Marathon des Sables that I was like, okay, I actually need to do a bit of research here, like create a training plan, like sign down to a couple of other like like step up events, do a marathon, do a first ultra, and then kind of get myself into a position where I can complete this, and try and enjoy it.
So when you signed up, you were not able to. Well, you hadn't run a marathon.
Well, I actually had. So I'd done one when I was at uni. So, and I did everything you shouldn't do. And actually, I think it was a really good experience in hindsight, because I signed down with a mate, and we were raising money for teenage cancer research, and got a place. And as I say, didn't really train, did everything you shouldn't do, went out for a run a couple of times a week, built up the volume a little bit, and then got injured 6 weeks before and didn't run until the day, and did it on like painkillers and ibuprofen, and it was awful. And I hit the wall so hard, and then I fell over on the mall, which was pretty embarrassing. And then finished it, but then didn't run for like 2 years after that. But actually, that experience, literally, I remember the day I got into Marathon des Sables, which actually was a funny experience in itself, because I remember it was in my head that I wanted to do this thing, but I didn't really think I'd get in. I genuinely thought that, and it's ironic now because I'm in this space and I know these things are all rubbish, but I generally thought that their marketing, it was, sign down on this wait list and log in at this time and, pay your deposit. If you're lucky, and you might get a place. And obviously everyone who logs in at that time gets a place. But I genuinely didn't think I would get in. I thought if I would get in, it was like, meant to be or whatever. And I still had like a year or whatever to prepare for it. But I remember at the moment I did get in, which was the day I signed down, which was that moment you pay the deposit. I was like, shit. I sat down and was like, okay, let's build this out, because this is something I didn't do 2 years ago and it was awful. Let's look at, okay, what I'm on now. Okay, let's like try and get like a marathon training plan in, give myself a bit of time. Let's build up to that. And then let's, give myself a bit of time off after that to like recover it, etc. And now let's like ramp it up again. And I was pretty like, I created like a real proper plan, which I actually really enjoyed, like building out and doing and creating. And that actually meant that I was able to, enjoy it and do a little bit better. And yeah, as you say, I think because of my experience during that event, that kind of got me then hooked on the sport as a whole, got me into the sport as a whole. Whereas the previous one, I think I just didn't respect and didn't, handle any, really the way you should. And then, didn't do any more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'm probably in the same stage as you right now. Like, I like running, but I've definitely got no respect for it. I have this idea that I can just feel my body and I just go for runs. And if I feel like it, I'll be like, okay, I'll just do 20K, but then I'll get back. I won't be able to walk for 3 days.
Yeah.
But I just hate planning things. Have you always been a planner since you were like young? Is it something, because you studied, I mean, you worked as an accountant and did all of the accountancy exams.
Yeah.
So I assume that teaches you a relatively regimented way of thinking.
It does. Yeah, you're right.
And you see the benefits of it, more importantly.
I'm trying to think. I have always been a planner. I've always been the kind of guy that gets assignments done and likes to be prepared. And I don't like the last minute stress of things. So I like knowing kind of where I am and how I'm going to get there. And that's been something I think I've had since I was, 12, 13 years old. I think you're right that accountancy exams very much, teach you quite like a formulaic approach to a lot of things. I don't know how much. In fact, I don't think I learned much from the exams. Looking back now, I think the experience in 3 years as an accountant was extremely valuable. But most of that was from going into different businesses and seeing how they operate, rather than the exams, which actually are quite kind of tick boxy. And to be honest, I don't think, if you ask me, the most 10 basic questions from my first year exam, I probably couldn't remember them, because it's just about consuming a load of a volume of knowledge, and then kind of, puking it out on a piece of paper, rather than actually really teaching you, actually how to like argue or how to evaluate a business or, you know, all of these things. So I think, yeah, it's funny. Like, I think if I look back at those exams and I look back at uni, the specifics of what you learn, and I think it's probably very similar for a lot of people, the specifics of what you learn, you know, haven't really helped much. But the skills that you learn, you know, this is how I prepare for an exam. This is how I manage my workload, and this is how I fit this in with my life. That is incredibly important. And I think you are right, actually, looking back now, because, you know, 3 years of those exams on top of doing a full-time job and then on top of doing this training just meant I had to be incredibly organized, and create a plan around everything. And yeah, that's definitely something which has stuck with me, which I think would be easy not to, as like a, you know, a startup founder, where actually your time is kind of more or less under your own control.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You said you don't like last minute stress. Like, in comparison, I love last minute stress. It's almost like an adrenaline rush for me.
Yeah.
And so when I was first like started reading books and, you know, like the whole personal development thing, when I first started paying attention and seeking advice from people who have been successful, I would follow every piece of advice. Like, I would listen to a podcast, write down the advice, do it the next day. And I kept just being like, why is this not working? But I think that's a good example. You don't like last minute stress. I do like last minute stress. So we're going to have two different ideas of what a good day is. So I think it's so important that you work out what your strengths are and make sure you play into that instead of trying to take someone else's blueprint.
Yeah, 100%. And being open-minded and working out and just being super like self-aware. Like, you know, I think it's, you know, everyone's got different ways of working, and everyone, you know, things work completely different for you and I. And actually, I think we just got to kind of like try and understand that. Yeah, and I'm very guilty of that as well. You know, my mood at any one time is like 95% of whatever I've just listened to or read or whatever. But yeah, it's it's fun. It's interesting.
In fact, I think you and your co-founder Jamie have a very interesting chemistry, because as you were saying earlier, you do both have different strengths that do play together nicely. Can you talk a bit about like how that works? What role you both take? Are there any challenges? You know, anything along those lines?
Yeah, like we're totally different, and we like have known that since day one, and actually kind of embrace it. It's kind of like a funny marriage. But he's like very much kind of extroverted, center of attention. You know, cares a lot about like brand, like visual stuff. I'm much more. I'm his hair, his skin color, but is incredibly like good at that side of things, the visual side. Whereas I'm actually much less so. I'm much, you know, he's I can't remember. There's like 4 different types of thinker, and one is very visual. I'm what you call like AD or AC. I can't remember, but it's basically I'm numbers and words. That's what works for me. So it's definitely a challenge because we see many things very differently, but you know, that's not a bad thing. Like that's been like one of the big reasons like we've done okay in the last few years, is because we've had so many discussions. And, you know, I say discussions because they're not arguments, it's 2 different points of view, and neither of us is often right, but often we kind of come to an agreement, which is probably the best case scenario, because we do just see the world slightly differently, and we both like accept that and acknowledge it. But yeah, in terms of how we work, he kind of deals with kind of big picture stuff, kind of vision, brand, tone of voice, pretty much all the marketing side of things. I'm more operations, finance, overall strategy, kind of integrating the business as a whole. And it is something which has taken a bit of time to develop, like specific roles. And I think it's actually quite hard, particularly when you're in a small team and you want to get involved in everything because it is your baby. But I think the better we've, you know, the more we do quite specific things and the more we own our areas, the kind of more efficient we get. And it's just really the only way to work like productively. But yeah.
Has there ever been a decision that, well, maybe there hasn't because you've like agreed in the middle, but has there ever been something where Jamie's been like, trust me, this is how we're doing it, and you've disagreed, and he's like, no.
Oh yeah, 100%, loads of times, and the other way, and that's where it comes down to owning your areas. like I know that Jamie's understanding of how a picture looks or a video looks is better than mine. Like he just has a better eye for it. And in the same way, like the way I create an operational plan for an event is much better than the way Jamie does it. So there's some things that, you know, some categories, some areas where we just say, okay, we're gonna agree to disagree, and this is your area, so we're gonna trust you. And you know, that's, I think it's often difficult, and I think, you know, even Jamie and I, who get along extremely well, you know, like I don't know, wedding, you know, we're like best mates kind of thing. But there is, you know, there's often tension. I think it's often like one of those things which is a real challenge for, you know, startups and founders, because it's an incredibly like, you know, intimate, stressful environment, and you know, people care a lot about how things are done. But I think you've just got to, you know, take a back seat and, like we were saying earlier, just be like self-aware as you can and just have an open mind. And you know, I'm happy to be wrong. You know, that's very much something, you know, which is fine. And trying to take your ego out of any decision making, and understand that, you know, everyone who's, whether it's Jamie and I or whether it's someone else in the company, everyone wants the, you know, the best result at the end of the day. And you know, so yeah, we've definitely had decisions like that, but yeah, we're still talking.
That's really cool. How do you set, so you have 7 employees, right?
Yeah, five technical employees, 2 placement students.
Okay. And how do you sort of, what's your approach to setting, like, do you set like a vision so everyone's on board with like what UltraX is trying to do? Obviously sustainability and D&I is a part of that, big part of that, sounds like. And if so, like, what's your thought process for all of those things?
Yeah, I think it's creating like a coherent, you know, team, which, you know, like what basically moves in the same direction, all comes down to that vision and that communication of that vision, and making it really clear from day one exactly what that is. We've actually been quite fortunate, I think, because actually our vision hasn't changed since day one, and a lot of things have, a lot of the you know, details have, but you know, what we're trying to do hasn't changed from day one, and it's quite clear, it's quite easy to communicate at a basic level. You know, we want to have this number of races, you know, we want to have, these are the formats, we want to have this number of competitors, and we want to essentially create a brand which, you know, it becomes the, you know, the iPhone to phones, what, you know, essentially we want to, you know, be that. We want people in 5 years' time to say, I've done an UltraX or I've done an ultramarathon, that kind of thing. So yeah, we've always been quite good at kind of communicating that, and really like refocusing it, and every kind of 6 months or a year, we'll have like a sit down and we'll kind of go through everything for the next year, and yeah, the kind of the mission, so to speak. And I think the good thing about what we do is actually it is, you know, it's something we actually care quite a lot about. And it's like, it's not, you know, we are a business at the end of the day, but this is like a value-led business. You know, we are trying to, you know, take people on like transformative journeys. And, you know, that is something that is incredibly important that all of our team buy into, and will always be. And I think the fact that, you know, we do what we do means that when we employ people, when we recruit people, they have to buy into that. So actually it's fairly straightforward, and particularly once you've been and experienced a couple of events, to kind of align with that. So yeah, but yeah, it's definitely, it's a bit of a learning curve always, like managing people. And I think it's probably one of the more challenging things I've found over the last like 4 years. Like actually at the end of the day, it's quite easy to do your tasks well if it's you're doing something you know well and enjoy it and care a lot about it, but actually making other people you know, buy into it to the same level that you do, or accepting that they won't, is something, is a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to come back to talking about how you've learned to manage people, but I also want to dig more into like sustainability and D&I, because they're easy things to say, and a lot of businesses do say that. I bumped into the head of ESG, apparently, of Shell in a pub, and he was giving me a lot of spiel about ESG at Shell, which is like, I'm sure they're doing some work, but it's a hard sell. Let's put it that way. So how
Yeah.
is there a place or a reason, or where does this desire to include more people and leave less impact on the world? Where
Yeah,
does that
so
come
I
from?
guess they're two separate things, but both things that we care a lot about and also are incredibly important to our community, and we know that. So taking the D&I piece firstly, so as I've kind of already like kind of alluded to, accessibility is like, you know, the biggest point of our brand, and we essentially exist because we want more and more people to do events like this because we think they're incredibly like valuable, amazing experiences. So historically, and there's many reasons for this, but historically it's been a very male-dominated sport, and the average age is generally like 45-ish, and there's very few minority ethnic groups participating in the sport. So we've done a lot of work around trying to encourage more female participation, trying to bring the average like demographic down, and also increasing our like minority ethnic group participation. And that was a lot of that work kind of came out of that kind of COVID time. And again, there's kind of like you can kind of go into a lot of detail in each of those things, but I think the thing we found most important in those things has always been, and we've kind of like focused on, the very beginning, we focused quite a lot on like price point and like, you know, bits like that. But actually the most important has always been education and interaction. So education, by which I mean explaining how you, Ollie, can do one of these events, but also showcasing the people, particularly in these groups, which are taking up a minority, you know, female participation, etc., showing the competitors that are doing the events and really telling their story and showcasing that story, and almost like overemphasizing it if necessary. And what was the other one? Education and outreach. So like working with kind of community groups. So like there's several different, you know, running groups or movements, whether it's like she races or whether it's black trail runners, or, you know, things like this. And essentially we've had a lot of conversations where it's literally like, you know, hey, Ollie, like how, like, what do you want? How can we help? Like, what can we do? Would you like to come and experience an event? Like all these kind of things, because, you know, those are the conversations which make the difference. And then it's like, you know, and then we do a lot of like, now we do a lot of tracking around are the changes we've made, are the changes we're making actually making a difference. So like we can say, you know, last year we had X% of female participation. This year we want to beat that. This year we had X% of like minority ethnic groups participating in events. Next year we want to beat that. And so we can kind of see whether the benchmarks or the changes we're making are making a difference in the grand scheme of things. And from what we've seen, we're kind of ahead of the kind of industry average. You know, I think we had 44% female participation last year. Our average age is like 34. But, you know, there's still a long way to go. And then
what do you think sorry, I'll just go on that first. What do you think so what is the end goal of this? I'm on board with you, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a bit. So increasing participation, so more people get to have this experience. That's the end goal.
Yeah, I think so. The population of the UK is 50% women. I don't see why 50% of people who finish, you know, ultramarathons aren't the same. So essentially, yeah, encouraging more people to take on these challenges because we believe, you know, it's a great experience. And breaking down the barriers that prevent people doing them. Yeah.
Is there any changes you can speak about specifically to demonstrate a change in the process or marketing or anything you've done that you saw a demonstrated impact in the final numbers?
Yeah. So like, as I say, a lot of it's around imagery and storytelling. But in terms of like event specifics, so things like we used to offer unisex t-shirts, which actually is a male t-shirt. So we now do male and female t-shirts. Increasing the number of toilets on course has been a big one. It's more difficult in places like Jordan, but for all of our UK-based races, now we have toilets on course. We have sanitary products as like by standard on each of our aid stations, which actually makes a big difference. A lot of it's around communication of what is available at each campsite, because I think it's just more challenging for women to get an understanding of and be comfortable with spending 5 days in a desert camp. So trying to explain exactly what's on offer, making sure there's no like expectation gap, that kind of thing, super important. And yeah, a few other kind of bits and bobs here and there, but those are the kind of
that's really cool.
things. Yeah.
No, good for you guys, because I think you're definitely, if you're not leading the charge in startups and businesses all over, then you're definitely at the front of the pack. I think it's definitely a very important thing.
Thank you.
I mean, I definitely appreciate the fact that when I'm at work, it's not all men, because I love having different people with different experiences and different ideas and different strengths. Like some are good at planning, some are good at numbers, some are good at vision. And it's a way nicer place to work when you've got that variety. So I think it's good, all the work anyone's done to like push that forward is a great thing. Sustainability, is it quite straightforward? Like the earth is potentially dying. Like let's slow that down.
It's a really difficult one. I think if you look at events as a whole, and a lot of people are now jumping on the trend and getting rid of t-shirts, getting rid of mandatory t-shirts, something we've never done. Offering people the chance to get rid of medals. Unfortunately, the biggest contributor to climate change is massively travel. It's 90+% of any event, whether it's UK or international. So actually, the actual fundamental operation of the event is very small, which is obviously complicated for an event where we travel internationally a lot. So it's something we're incredibly conscious of. We basically monitor all of our carbon emissions as a company and offset, which isn't obviously the solution. But we are a carbon neutral company because we do an audit at the end of every year, and we look at our flights and contribution, and then we do some rewilding and planting of trees kind of in Eastern Europe. But we also
how does that work? Do you have a company that you do that through, or is it like a self-organized thing?
No, we have a partner called Mossy Earth that is a Spanish-based company, and they essentially assist us with the monitoring and managing of our kind of carbon offset work. So and it kind of works twofold, because on one level, we're planting trees and we're doing some rewilding projects, which is good. But also the other level, it's putting like an actual cost for us on our carbon emissions, and it's meaning that we are monitoring them and managing them. So I think measuring is like the first step for a lot of companies, because once you have like a number associated with it, you can try and beat it in future, or try and work out, what are the significant drivers, what are the significant contributors. And so it's been a really interesting learning curve. It's something we are conscious of, that, as I say, that flights are a massive contributor. I think we did a piece at our Sri Lanka event, and I think the overall carbon emissions from the event was 76 or 77 tons. And of that, and this is just our crew traveling to the event, so not competitors, 65 of it was flights. So it's such a huge percentage. So I'm very hopeful that someone, Elon Musk, put your hand up, is going to find a way to travel more efficiently in the future. We encourage, for all our events where it is possible, we spend a lot of time making sure that each of our events in the UK and in Europe are super accessible from like train stations. And we do things like incentivize people to car share. So if people drive in a car of 4 people, it's actually the same output as being on a train. So like things like that, we offer free parking for those people, for example, and little things like that. As I say, we've never done race t-shirts. We offer people the chance to not have a medal if they want it, and we plant a tree instead. And we try and reduce. We're almost down to 0 single-use plastic across all events. Not quite, but we're trying pretty hard to get there, and we have made a lot of reductions in that sense over the last few years as well. And it also goes into pretty much all of our supplier relations, all of our supplier conversations now. It's just something like, okay, what's your policy in this sense? What are you doing? Like, it's part of why we work with ASICS. It's part of why we work with several of our suppliers. We start producing merch with a new brand, and that is specifically because they have a much more ethical supply chain, which is important. And I think the more we can do, and the more we learn, hopefully the more we set an example for other brands to kind of do the same. And these things don't all happen at once, but we make lots of small steps, and progress can happen.
Is this all self-guided, or is there any regulation about hitting carbon targets?
It's self-guided. We work with various organizations. There's no regulation. I'd like to see in the future some kind of like carbon VAT or something like that. I think got a friend who was recently in Costa Rica, and everything there has a mandatory, like they call it like sustainability tax or whatever, and it means it's super expensive. But at the moment there's no regulation. There's no you need to govern the events this way. You need to do that. It's self-guided, self-monitored. But as I say, we do work with. There's several organizations and experts, and there's quite a lot of resource out there if you want to look for it.
Again, like, good for you guys, because most people would think, it's hard starting a business, especially you're not like an established business. So it's very impressive that you're prioritizing all of this stuff as well as keeping the business going. I think it's also good for people to know that there's companies like Mossy Earth where you can now become, you can get paid to work in these companies. It's not a charity thing anymore. In actual fact, like, the climate industry is growing so fast that it's actually a job now.
Yeah.
Like, someone has to write these policies,
and I think that's the way it's got to go. Like, it's unfortunately, and as I say, I was kind of alluded to, we're about to start partnering with a new brand for merch. And the co-founder of that company, or the founder of that company, his big thing is it has to make economic sense. Like, at the end of the day, most t-shirt companies that use recycled fabric and come from the UK are bloody expensive, and that makes it really difficult when I'm going to my board, or you're going to your shareholders or whatever, to make that decision to, okay, we're going to use this, and our t-shirts are going to double in price. And actually, it's all very well for customers to say, I like the idea of sustainability, but you're probably going to lose out at some point there. So I think it has to make economic sense for business owners, decision makers, to make that decision. And I think that's hopefully what's going to change over the next few years. I really think it will, but I think it's just going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's definitely, it's good to see it finally like going in that direction. The other thing I want to say on sustainability is, I have a thing where I kind of find that I don't think people really talk about the second order effect of the carbon emission. There are some carbon emissions, like flying to Ibiza for a week and having a party. Actually, no, that's a bad example, because that has a place as well in someone's life. But there's some carbon emissions which are for something like making loom bands, which are essentially a waste of everything. And then there's flying to an event where you learn more about yourself, you challenge yourself, you train for months,
completely.
You become better as a person.
And
there's so many benefits.
Yeah, and call me an idealist, but and I was at a kind of a conference, an events conference in November last year, and this was kind of one of, someone was speaking there about events, the horror of the earth kind of thing, they should be banned, etc. And events have an incredibly important place to play, because essentially we have a lot of power, we interact with a lot of people, and we can give information, we can produce information, we can manufacture people's opinions, we can influence people. And if you get events companies that are preaching the right message and are educating people through their journey. Like for example, you sign down for Sri Lanka, the first email you'll get is welcome email, and at the bottom it'll say, we work with Mossy Earth. It's basically saying that because of your flying here, there's going to be a significant carbon output. There's an opportunity to offset that, but something to consider. So, yes, there may be an initial, negative impact from your race in Jordan or Sri Lanka. And yes, that could have been avoided if you hadn't done it. But maybe there's a chance that you'll go back home and you'll actually change your lifestyle a little bit going forward. And actually, could that be more beneficial, more important, or could it impact you? So, and I think, and we're small scale events. So I like to think that, events aren't the devil when it comes to these kind of things. And actually they have a really important role to influence people and hopefully make, really positive changes in the whole climate and sustainability debate.
Yeah, sounds like you can definitely do that. Again, I couldn't agree more. I think that's really cool. What can you talk a bit more about? So obviously you've done MDS, Marathon des Sables, and you run races for people. What is it about running, and especially long distance events? Why is that a good thing for people? What is the benefit they get? What does it teach you?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. So we're a running company at kind of face value. The running, I think, teaches you so much. It's an experience. It gets you to a level of physical fitness, but the experience of putting yourself through a journey which essentially gets you from point A to point Z, where you finish one of these events, that is incredible because it takes you through enormous physical and personal stress. It teaches you a hell of a lot of management, time management, body management. It gets you to interact with a lot of really interesting people. The thing I love about these events is that, and you'll have seen it in Jordan, you sit down and, from an outside, it looks like, 30, 50, 100, pretty standard Joe blogs, but you speak to every single one of them, they'll have a story because something in their head has motivated them to be like, yeah, I'm going to spend 6 months of my life training for this experience. And I like to think that it's, it's worth it. So it's difficult to kind of put it down into one thing. And I don't think it's just running, but I would just, I'd encourage people to take on things that scare them a little bit, and put them under a little bit of stress. And I think that can be incredibly rewarding, beneficial. And I think generally when people finish it, they will be very proud of what they've achieved and have a different outlook on everything. Honestly, it's a new lease of life. It's a confidence booster. You've achieved something which is to so many people and probably to yourself once was impossible. And yeah, I don't think it is about the running. I think it's about, creating a plan and kind of executing it and achieving something big, and doing it kind of in small steps.
Brick by brick. It seems like it can give you a bit of a step change in your life. Like you were this person and then you've got this experience. And David Goggins always talks about you build up a mental backlog of things you've done. So when it does get tough again, you're like, if you're at work and you've got some issues to deal with and you've just got back from 250K in Jordan, it's gonna put it into perspective.
Yeah, I do think there's a type of muscle memory there in that, the more difficult things you put yourself through, the easier they become. And that's not just, it doesn't have to be specifically the same experience. Running through a desert isn't something which is going to challenge people every day. But the fact that there was a moment where you genuinely probably thought you couldn't go on and you did and you managed it and it was okay, that's something which will stick with you. And yeah, it's amazing how many conversations you have with people that have done these types of things and they say exactly the same thing. And that's the message that we're trying to get across. And I'd love just to try and get one more person to do that and have that experience would be incredible.
That is incredible. It's cool that you've got that. Every extra one person, you can give them this whole experience. When you're managing people, how do you, what challenges have you come up against? Because this is your first team that you've built. You've worked in teams before when you were at your job. Um, what lessons would you give to other leaders and other future leaders?
I think it's difficult to get people, or it basically you've got to understand people, and you've got to listen to them, because particularly when you're in a kind of small business where it is like your baby, and you are obviously kind of obsessed with it, and you obviously work silly hours on it at times, and particularly when it's like young, and everyone in the team may buy into the vision and may really like the idea, and it is really sexy and exciting. I think you often have unrealistic expectations, and I think I've learned that I need to kind of check myself quite a lot on that, and understand that it is a job. At the end of the day, I think our challenges will always, and it may always be, is that from the outside, this is a super exciting, sexy, proposition, and it's easy to jump in and think it's all going to be fun. And I think it's quite easy to manage people when they're having fun. But what's difficult, I've found, is when suddenly it's not fun, or suddenly it's difficult, and suddenly something isn't going to plan. And working that out. So I think, and I'm definitely learning in this. I've kind of only really been doing it for 3 years, and it's still like one of my like real areas for improvement. But I think the more communication you have, we have these things called, like, we have a check-in every 4 weeks where we sit down one-on-one with, Jamie and I will have like different team members each, and we just basically say, kind of small picture, how's it going? How can we help? And it's amazing how many times things are brought up that you would never have been aware of if you hadn't had this like out of the business discussion. So I think that's been incredibly important. Understanding people, listening to them is incredibly important. Communication is everything. I mean, these all sound like really basic points, but even in a tiny team, it's quite easy to expect people completely understand things because I've got it in my head. But communicating really, really clearly and trying to do it, I think there's a massive difference between doing things face to face and remotely or via email. Is really, really important.
Yeah, that's a good answer, because I threw you a very general question, but that was quite good and targeted. But trying to get more targeted on it, because it is like it's a big problem. Like, everyone's had a shit manager, basically. But like, how do you, when someone's really not met an expectation, what's your internal process?
What I've learned, and as I say, like, I'm learning and I'm working stuff out, but it can't come from you. So like, say we've just been on a recce, and I thought you were really shit, or we had a meeting and you just didn't turn up. I don't think there's any value in me being like, Ollie, what the hell was that? But instead saying, okay, Ollie, how do you feel that went? Okay, do you think it could have gone better? Are you happy with how that meant? And I think, I think you basically, I've worked out that whatever you're doing, it needs to come from them, and getting full like understanding is super important. And it's funny because really we've only had a very small team for a few years, and so my experience of that is, not that much. But we have volunteers at every single event, and in a weird way, you're team managing them the whole time. They're not employees, obviously. It's quite different, and we've had events where we've had great crews, and we've had events where we've had average crews. And I don't think that's because of the people that were there. I think that's often been because of the way we've handled it and kind of communicated with them and educated them. But I think I'd say that comes down to 3 things. And that is, you've got to give people a very clear mission, whether it's creating an event or doing head of marketing or whatever. You've got to give them clear instruction. Number 2 is you've got to give them resource. So you've got to give them the tools to complete that mission. So, give them, I don't know, water check thingies. You've got to give them vehicles to get to checkpoints. And then number 3, you basically got to give them freedom. So you've got to trust them. And I think trust is something which I think in the past, maybe if you'd asked me 4 years ago, I'd have said it's got to be earned. Whereas now it's got to be something which is given. And I think you've got to show that trust. You've got to you've got to give it, particularly if you're a leader. You've just got to show, hey, Ollie, this is your baby. You go run it. You go do that. And I trust you to do that. And I think, I'd say those 3 things are massive in, trying to get people to perform and trying to get them to add value. And yeah,
that last one is huge. Like, I've got a job at the moment. I have managers, and when you don't have that trust to kick off everything, it is the most frustrating thing. But then equally, it's a 2-way relationship. You have to respect the trust and then not let them down. And I feel like you don't really get many chances at that. So yeah, that's a good point. Do you think, have you learned this as you've gone, or did you sort of pick it up when you were at Grant Thornton and PwC from your managers? Because it's a hard skill.
No, I think pretty much everything I've learned from doing it or listening to, or like podcasts or books and stuff. I think, funnily enough, I had a discussion with someone else quite recently about like feedback, and I think I'm pretty bad at feedback. And the discussion, essentially, we've got to the conclusion that it was because I've never been in an environment where feedback's been a thing. And I actually think the managers that I had at PwC and Grant Thornton weren't great. And it may be just because of the attitude I have. I wasn't open to it, or because I was I was a small fish in a really big pond, and actually I was basically on a grad scheme for 4 years. So actually, I expect when you get a bit older, when you get out of that, then there's much more opportunity for like personal development, because really you're just another fish in the pond kind of thing. So yeah, I'd say I've very much kind of learned it on the job. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read quite a lot about this kind of like thing, and I'm always trying to pick up ideas and work out what works for me or works for us, because I think you can read 20 different books, you can listen to 20 different podcasts with super successful people, and they'll say like completely contradictory things. So yeah, I think you've got to like try and be open to ideas, but also don't take everything you hear at face value, or read at face value.
Yeah, interesting. When I was speaking to my first podcast guest, Bron, who he works in hedge funds and now he runs a psychedelic VC. I think you listened to it, so I'm preaching to the choir.
Love that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thanks. But he was saying a thing about, he's always felt this thing. He never worked for a big consultancy or investment bank, and he never went to like a great university, and he always felt inferior because of those things. You've gone to a good uni, you've had the good job, and now you've started a successful business so far, touch wood. So how do you think about those things now? Like, did you need the accounting experience? Could you have done it without it? I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's such a difficult one. I think I'm always the type of person that says, if you can go back and change anything, what would you change? And I say absolutely nothing, because like I wouldn't be the person I am, or I wouldn't be thinking the way I would. Or
I agree.
I think, as I said earlier, there's a lot of stuff I've done where I haven't learned anything particularly which I'll use today in terms of knowledge. But in terms of, the way I think and the way I experience the world and the way I plan and what motivates me, I think that's been a product of every experience I've had, whether it's been,
How about, given that you've done those 4 years, and there's some people who won't have the opportunity, or they won't be able to, or they just didn't plan, they haven't done it. What did you learn from that, which you're now taking away, which other people can learn in different domains? But like, what skills have been, what's important?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of it was confidence for me. So one of the greatest thing about being an accountant was you get to go into every business, and technically you can ask any question you want, and they're supposed to give you an answer. They're legally entitled to give you an answer. You basically have a complete overview. And what I found fascinating was I went into, work for PwC and had massive clients, household names, and you go into all these huge companies that face value, they look well set up. They've got a slick brand. They've got a slick website. And it's a dude sitting behind a spreadsheet who doesn't really know what he's doing, which is obviously a little bit of a generalization. But like, I learned that I think, we've always, there's a lot of reasons not to do these things. And there's a lot of reasons why you're like, oh, I'm not smart enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not, I don't have the skill set. And I think 3 or 4 years of being an accountant gave me that real confidence, because I'd seen it, that, I could do something similar, or I could start a company, and that it was worth just trying. I appreciate that means anyone listening to this, the view is, I can take that word and take a bit of confidence and, go away. But I think, it's difficult until you've been there and seen it and experienced it. I think you do learn a lot of, as I say, like self-management, time management. I had a massive workload for 4 years.
Huge.
You do, do 15 exams, you do a job, which, I mean, for a lot of time, it's more that it's not a 9 to 5. Particularly we had this thing called busy season, which is like January to April. And that's, you're working till, you're working 60 hours weeks pretty much for those 4 months. And then I was training for these events. So, each person who was going through those things probably would have managed it differently. But during that time, I worked out actually what worked for me, and how I could manage my time, and how I could, basically be at my best self. Which definitely is stuff I took away into then starting my own business. And I also got very good at Excel, which actually is pretty handy now.
I was going to say, when I was talking about, like, I was going to frame how you and Jamie were different. And I remember being like at finish line, and Jamie would be, I don't know, doing like piece to camera or something like that. And you'd be there with a laptop, like making sure the spreadsheet is up to date with who's come back and who's which I think sums it up very well. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm conscious we're getting to near the end, and it's a Sunday night, so I'm not gonna make it run too late. And hopefully
you've got to assume delivery to me 21 minutes, mate. That's your cutoff.
Nice. Okay, perfect. I find it quite funny how a marathon 40 years ago was like a huge thing, and now you're sitting here running a business that does 250k races. How far can it go?
I don't know. I think it's going to go very far. I mean, even over the last few years, there's been, more and more insane things. There's these, backyard ultras where people are basically running loops for as long as they can until there's one person left. There's now a lot of 200-mile races are becoming a big thing, particularly in the US. There's a couple in the UK now, but there's a series of 200-mile races where people will do that in one go. I don't know. I actually think we're only just beginning. I think particularly over the last 12 months, we've seen a lot of brands jump into the ultra and trail space, because a lot of people have got into the space since COVID. And really, before then, there's not really been any money in the space, any brands, any professionals, and I think that's only going to go one way. And the more money's in the sport, the more professionals in the sport, the more incentive there is for people to, train hard and compete. The bigger the sport's going to get, and the more extreme events that are going to happen. I think it's going to get I don't know if it will be mass market, these big ones, but I do think we're going to see, more and more people doing, crazy distances. As I say, there's 200-mile races. There's things like backyard ultras. There's a race called I can't remember what it's called, something Britannia, which is basically, it's not really a race. It's a self-supported. It's like a 30-day challenge where people will basically run the length of the UK, the Land's End of John O'Groats route, but supported as part of an event. It's a growing space, and I think it's actually really exciting, because I do think, whilst there's some incredible athletes in the space, there still aren't really any big. There isn't prize money really, and there isn't that much support for the very best, and that's starting to change. So people are taking, much more detailed training approaches, getting much more involved in it, and I think we're going to see huge improvements in course records. I think we're going to see, people do crazy fast 100-mile times, crazy fast 24-hour track times, all these things. I think I'm genuinely, like, as a kind of spectator and as someone who's involved in the sport, I'm super exciting just to see what's going to happen over the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, that would be so cool to watch it, because at the moment it seems like a challenge, but to watch it turn into a spectator sport would be amazing. I imagine if there was like a Tour de France except for ultra running.
Yeah, I think it will happen. Like, one of the big limitations on ultra running in the past, or trail, is technology. Is that these events generally take place in super remote places, which, as we've already spoken about, there's no signal. So actually, and also because there's small numbers of competitors, so actually, like, getting that out is really difficult. Really, the only way to experience it was to do one. But as that's starting to change, we're getting and we're getting better technology, better footage. We're getting like drones involved, like getting amazing GoPro footage. It's becoming a lot more. It's becoming more of a media product. And there are a couple of brands which are now, like, pushing that a bit more as another part of their business. So yeah, I'd love to see it get more like more like Tour de France and Formula One. I think it would be. I mean, I think it's an amazing story. Like, it's watching people go up and down, because there's so much drama in a long event.
Yeah.
Even the very best in the world will have hours where they're really struggling in a 24-hour race or a 5-day race, and you have bad days and good days. So I think there's a massive opportunity for the people that can kind of capture that in the future.
Yeah, I really want to see someone beat Salome one day, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I think it will. Well, he gets older every year, and he is already 50,
true.
I don't know, 52 now, and people are getting increasingly close. So we'll see.
He just got 2 old crinkled water bottles and just smashes it. So it's not all about the kit. So how does this? You just partnered with ASICS. Is that related to merch or no?
Kind of. I mean, not really. They're ASICS have come on board as kind of like a headline sponsor. So there's no kind of specific merch agreement. We'll be doing a lot of shoe testing at our events, and offering our competitors an opportunity to experience their products, experience their brand a little bit. But it's not really a merch. Okay.
Really. But will we see any like prize money or anything like material changes to the event, or is it more of a?
No, it's really just their involvement.
Okay.
And adding to the kind of experience for runners. There'll be activations at each of the races. There'll be a few people from their team. We're trying to work out some quite fun things we can do about them on course, and how we can jazz up a checkpoint, and how we can jazz up the event village a little bit. But no, it's really just ASICS are a great partner for us, because their big thing is accessibility. They've always been about championing the not the elite runner, the kind of your average your normal person, and that's really what we're about as well. So it's just an opportunity to kind of align our brands a little bit, try and get in front of each other's audiences, and just increase that experience and offer a better experience
Yeah,
for our competitors.
that's super cool. Where do you see Ultra X now? We'll sort of draw this to a nice roundabout close, and hopefully we'll reflect back on this in the future. So, where do you see Ultra X in a year and in 5 years, as of today?
So 1 year, we're going to be back to pretty much all international stuff. Like COVID meant that we kind of pivoted what we offered quite significantly. So at the end of last year, 50% of our races were UK. Really what we want to be about is offering, bucket list challenges in amazing locations. Not that there aren't the UK, but, places which, are once in a lifetime, places like Tanzania, places like Jordan, places like Sri Lanka. So this year is very much about getting back on that. So we've launched Morocco and Madeira this year, and we're looking at 2 new events for 24. So it's basically getting that portfolio kind of rebalanced.
Are they still secret?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. And then 5 years, but maybe from the perspective of your average runner, do they know about Ultra X? Is it a given that they're doing an Ultra X? Is it still a challenge? Is it a spectator sport?
That's several questions. Okay, so I think
Ollie, let's say Ollie, 24 from London, just got into running. At what point in his journey in 5 years?
So you go to your office and if you did a race with us tomorrow and you went into your office on Monday morning, you'd probably say I did an ultramarathon, and someone in your office would be like, oh, what's an ultramarathon? Can you explain that? And you'd have to go through the fun process of being like, oh, it's anything over 26.2 miles, or this was 220k over 5. So I'd like to think that in 5 years' time, you'll come back and you'll say, I've got an Ultra X, and you'll have a tattoo on your arm, just here, if not your forehead, and everyone will know what that means. And if anything, that will mean more to people than what an ultramarathon is. In a similar way to Ironman in triathlon, how many people know that Ironman is just a brand within a form of long distance triathlon? Not many, but they really associate Ironman with with an event, with something challenging, with something which tells you something about that person. Now, we're very different from Ironman in many ways, but what I like to think is we've got an opportunity to create a brand which can really mean something to many people, and to say something about you as a competitor and about the experience that you've had. So I think, big vision, big picture, soft, fluffy stuff, that's where we'd like to be in 5 years. I'd like to have, we've got 11 races a year at the moment this year, 11 locations. I'd like to have more like 25 within 5 years. At the moment, we're very kind of concentrated around GMT. If you look at our map of the world, it's basically Europe, Africa, Middle East. It would be nice to get a little bit either way, East and West. So I'd love to break into the States. I'd love to break into kind of Australasia. Australia, New Zealand would both be insane, amazing places for events, and places where we consistently get told we should put events on. But yeah, I think for us, it's just kind of continuing what we're doing, trying to put on more events, making sure we keep on putting on really good events that people are happy with. At the end of the day, I think it's very fun and good to focus on numbers and big picture and how many followers we have, but actually if we don't put on, we're only as good as our last event. And it's funny, we've now had like 6 months now in our kind of off season where we've been focusing all the big picture stuff and setting up events for next year and etc. But we've now got 4 weeks until our first race, and like if we can't put on an amazing experience, like we're doing it wrong. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like it's an operational business, and like putting on a smooth, slick event and giving people a great experience, that's got to be fundamental, and we've got to keep on doing that consistently. And I think we want to be known as incredibly professional organizers that are going to guarantee you an insane experience. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say in 5 years, and I'm sure I could go on for a lot longer, but
Yeah, amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to be rooting for you. I'm going to start telling people that I want to do an Ultra X one day, not an ultra marathon, because I want you guys to win ahead of the competitors. I usually end on a very gimmicky 3-2-1 format. I'm just going to carry it on because why not? Although I accept it as gimmicky. So, first one, 3 running gadgets that you would recommend people get, including nutrition, like anything related to running.
A watch.
A specific type?
A Garmin watch.
A Casio, a Rolex.
Get a Garmin. I've moved. We don't work with them, but I've worked with. I've used several. I think they're the best. I think they're the most reliable. I think there's lots which do lots of bells and whistles, but they're the most reliable, I think. And if you're going to train seriously about something, I think actually training where you do have a specific plan and look at some faster sessions, some slower sessions. I just think having that kind of data is incredibly useful. Don't read into it too much. It will tell you some things, and obviously you can go to town on it. So number one, I'd say a Garmin. It's okay. So number two, it's not really a thing, but I'd say get a training plan. I think one of the biggest trends I've seen over the last 5 years is everyone has a coach now. 5 years ago, no one had a coach. Now, I'd say 5% of our competitors have their own coach. I don't think you need to have your own coach, but I think you need a training plan if you're going to take on one of these, because you will get injured unless you manage yourself. And it's all very well, building up slowly. And but I just think it's really important to, even if it's just, training diary where you're tracking exactly what you're doing and building up, because at the end of the day, the biggest reason why people don't finish these things isn't physical inability. It isn't, their stomach problems, isn't their feet. It's because they get injured 6 weeks before the event because they're trying to do too much volume or they haven't built up properly. And they'll definitely
be from experience.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. I've done it loads of times. It's and it's very easy. You have one great run and you're like, I'm on top of the world, and then you go for another one the next day, and then suddenly something breaks. So I'd say number two is training plan, and I'm just slowly buying.
Okay, I've seen. Sorry, you guys have some good ones on your website as well, don't you?
Yeah,
I've seen that.
So so we wrote. Yeah, so we wrote through it's like some good free training plans which give you, and I wouldn't say take every session word for word, because everyone's slightly different, everyone's got different schedules, etc. But I think they're a really good guide for kind of just getting an illustration of how you get to that point and what are the stepping stones like, and what you should kind of be considering. So number two is a training plan. Number three, I think you should sign down to do an event. Sign down to an event, because I think we all need commitments. We all need motivations, and at the end of the day, there's never going to be a good time for anything. There's always going to be millions of reasons why you can't do it, whether that's a challenge or a business. So I think you just need to make the leap, even if it's something which terrifies you, or even if it's something which you think you can do quite easily and want to do a little bit faster. But I personally find I've always got something in the calendar, even if it's miles away. Partly because I enjoy it, but partly because I know it'll keep me accountable. So
completely agree.
Yeah,
and let me add on to that. If you're literally signed up for an event and you need an excuse to get out of anything, just saying you've got training for a marathon, people respect that. But if you say I just want to have a night off and relax, no one respects that. So that's another benefit of doing that. Okay, two. Judging by how quick it took you to come up with 3 running things, which is one of your passions, I'm worried this is going to take ages. But 2 worst pieces.
I want to give you really good answers. Yeah, okay, I'll be quicker this time.
Or worst things you've read. Like, what's something you tried to incorporate and you're like, nah, it didn't work for me?
There's a book called The 5 a.m. Club. Like, it's crazy. Like there's a good principle in it, which is you can start your day with like a bit of meditation, a bit of exercise, and a bit of planning. But like the philosophy of waking up at 5 a.m. every morning, which I know a lot of people particularly in this space, think is great because it makes them sound like they're super hardworking and super, all that. I think, not good advice.
Love that, because I saw that on Waterstones the other day, and I was like, I'm not.
It's worth a read. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't. Like,
Really?
there's like all these things, you learn something from doing it. And as I say, I think there are good principles. But I thought that was pretty unhealthy. Last thing I've read. Give me a one. I'll come back to it.
Okay. And one very simple. Even you can manage this one. What's one book recommendation, or podcast, or any like info?
Oh, I can give you so many. Can I have two for this one? I've got.
Okay, yeah, take two for this one.
So my favorite book of all time is Black Box Thinking, which is Matthew Syed, which is essentially based on the analogy is the black box in a airplane, which essentially when there's a crash, pilots or the air industry analyzes the black box, works out what went wrong, and improves. So it's all about basically treating failure as an opportunity to improve. Really, really good. I love all of Matthew Syed's work. Podcasts. I actually think Diary of a CEO is really, really good. I find it really. I know it's like the most widely listened to podcast in the world, probably. So it's probably not that unusual, but I listen to that pretty much religiously, and I think it's pretty insightful. And I think Steve Bartlett's a very good interviewer. So those are my two.
Awesome, perfect. Those are great, and you've done the one worst advice. You copped out of that, so nice. All right, Sam. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was a very good conversation. I enjoyed it. Do you feel like you learned something, even if it was from talking something through?
Yeah, I did, mate. It's always good. It's actually, I love these things because it's like it's very rare you get 90 minutes or 2 hours just to like sit and, as I said earlier, like focus just on one thing. So it's always fun, and really appreciate you having me on and enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I look forward to next time. It'll be good. I look forward to seeing where UltraX goes. We'll have to go for some more catch-up coffees and work it out.
100%. All the best.
All right.
Cheers, mate.